You wouldn't remember her if you saw her. Katharina Hartman wasn't loud. She wasn't stylish. She wasn't important. But she was always on time. Every morning at 7 a.m. without fail. She walked up the servants' entrance of 97 Cedar Street, carrying her cloth tote bag, lemon-scented gloves, and the kind of silence that made her forgettable. She didn't make eye contact. She didn't speak unless spoken to. Her job? Keep the floors spotless. Make the windows shine. Disappear before anyone noticed she was there. And she was good at it. For 3 years, Katharina worked in the Rivera estate, a grand house designed by Daniel Rivera himself, the man who built cities but barely spoke to his staff. The house was beautiful, marble floors, high ceilings, walls of glass, but no laughter, no warmth, just silence. There were rules. No entering the second floor without permission, no talking to the child, no using the master staircase. Katharina followed every rule, because that's what invisible people do. She cleaned around the edges of a life she was never meant to be part of, like a shadow, a ghost in someone else's story. It started like every other morning. Cold air, warm lemon water, the staircase gleaming under her cloth. But then, a cry, sharp, piercing, the kind of sound that slices straight through bone. Katharina froze. It wasn't just a baby crying. It was screaming, desperate, abandoned. The kind of cry that didn't wait to be understood. It demanded action. Her fingers tightened around the cleaning rag. She wasn't supposed to go upstairs. The nursery was off limits. Jacob had a nanny. That wasn't her job. But something felt wrong. No footsteps, no voices, no comfort. Just that baby, still screaming. Katharina stood at the base of the staircase, torn. Protocol said walk away, but her heart said go. She made a choice. One step, then another. Her heels echoed through the silent halls as she climbed the stairs. The moment her hand touched the nursery door, she knew nothing in this house would ever be the same again. The nursery door creaked as she pushed it open. The smell hit her first. Sour, stagnant, the scent of neglect. Toys scattered across the floor, a half-spilled bottle on the rug, and in the crib, Jacob. His face was flushed, streaked with tears. His onesie was soaked, clinging to his small body like cold glue. He reached out, not to a familiar face, not with words, just raw instinct, begging for comfort, for someone, anyone. Katharina's breath caught in her throat. She stepped forward, barely blinking. On the side table, a note. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Don't try to contact me. That was it. No name, no warning, just a final surrender. Katharina stood frozen. This wasn't her job. This wasn't her place. But then Jacob's eyes met hers. And for one fragile moment, time stopped. In his gaze, she didn't see a child she wasn't supposed to touch. She saw someone who had been left behind, someone who deserved more than silence. Her role said back away. Her heart said step in. She walked to the crib, reached down, and picked him up. Jacob clung to her like a lifeline. And in that exact moment, Katharina crossed the line. Not just physically, but with her heart. The kitchen was quiet. Morning light filtered through the window, cold and blue. Katharina stood there, holding Jacob against her chest, his breath quick, his body still trembling. She scanned the space. No baby tub, no nursery supplies, no soft towels folded just for him. All she had was a deep stainless steel sink, cold, industrial, a place meant for pots and pans, not babies. But it would have to do. Gently, she set Jacob on the counter beside her. He whimpered, but didn't cry. His eyes stayed fixed on her, watching, trusting. Katharina laid a fresh towel inside the sink, tested the water with her elbow, just like her mother once did years ago in a tiny village kitchen. The warmth of the water rose up, calming her. Slowly, carefully, she undressed the baby, one sleeve at a time. His skin was sticky, his curls matted with dried sweat. "You're safe now," she whispered. "No one's leaving you." She cupped the warm water into her hand and poured it gently over his back. Jacob shivered, then sighed. Katharina had never had children, but in that moment, she didn't need a degree. She had instinct, a quiet force inside her that said, "This is what love looks like." A steel sink, a woman with shaking hands, and a child who finally stopped crying. The water had cooled. The crying had stopped. Jacob just stared. His big brown eyes locked onto Katharina's face, not with fear, not with confusion, but with something much harder to name: hope. Katharina looked back at him. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the rules. All she saw was a child who had needed someone, and her, just her. She picked up the soft cloth, dipped it gently into the warm water, and slowly she began to wash him. One hand, one tiny foot, each tiny finger, carefully, lovingly. Like she was washing away more than dirt. She hummed softly, not a song she knew, but something old, maybe forgotten. A lullaby that carried warmth without needing words. Jacob blinked, then smiled. It wasn't big, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in that moment, something passed between them. Not a job, not duty, a connection. As if Jacob had chosen her. And in her heart, Katharina whispered back, "I choose you too. You don't have to give birth to love like a mother." Katharina didn't realize she believed that until now. As she held Jacob wrapped in a towel, his tiny hand gripping her shirt, something ancient, something sacred settled inside her. She wasn't his mother, but in that moment, she was. Because motherhood isn't about biology. It's not about blood. It's about presence, about choosing someone again and again, even when it isn't your job, even when no one asks you to. She kissed the top of his damp curls, then whispered into the quiet kitchen air, "You're not alone anymore." No one saw it. No one recorded it. But in that still morning, over a cold steel sink, a mother was born, not from labor, but from love. The front door clicked open. Daniel Rivera stepped into his house, phone in hand, earpiece still in place, voice mid-sentence with some high-powered client. He expected silence. Instead, he smelled baby soap, then the sound of breathing. He stopped, eyes scanning the room like an architect analyzing a structure gone wrong. Damp towel on the chair, tiny shoes by the sofa, a soft blanket draped over a woman's shoulder, Katharina, sitting, holding his son. Jacob was asleep in her arms, face nestled into her chest, fingers clutching her collar like he belonged there. Daniel's eyes widened. "What is going on here?" His voice was sharp, accusing. The earpiece fell to the floor. Katharina didn't move. She didn't flinch. She only whispered, "Please, sir, don't wake him. He just fell asleep." Daniel looked again, looked closer. His son, clean, dressed, breathing peacefully. And then he noticed something else. Jacob wasn't crying. Jacob wasn't afraid. He was safe, in the arms of someone Daniel had barely spoken to. His anger shifted, confusion crept in, and with it, a deep, unsettling question. Where was the nanny? "Explain, now." Daniel's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Katharina met his eyes, calm, steady, tired. She spoke softly, but without hesitation. "I heard him crying. I went upstairs. The room was a mess. There was a note. The nanny left." She paused. "I couldn't leave him like that." Daniel blinked, absorbing every word. His jaw tightened. He stepped forward, arms out. "Give him to me." Katharina hesitated. Slowly, she rose from the sofa and placed Jacob into his father's arms. For 1 second, it was quiet. Then, Jacob woke. His eyes flew open, and the screaming returned, full force, desperate, arms flailing. "No! No!" His little hands reached back toward Katharina. Daniel froze. He had never seen his son react this way. Katharina instinctively stepped forward. Please, I think he's still scared. Daniel looked down at the boy in his arms, now red-faced, panicked, sobbing, and something inside him cracked. Without a word, he handed Jacob back. Instantly, the child went silent, breathing slowed. Tiny fists unclenched. The boy nuzzled into Katharina's shoulder like a ship finding harbor. Daniel stared. This wasn't just comfort. This was trust, and it wasn't with him. Daniel stood frozen, his briefcase still in one hand, his son not in his arms, but in hers. And Jacob had never looked more at peace. The silence in the room was loud, almost unbearable. Finally, Daniel spoke, but not to Katharina, not to Jacob, to himself. The housemaid did what no one else dared to do. His voice cracked. Not out of anger, but something closer to shame. He sank slowly into a chair, shoulders heavy, eyes distant. For 3 years, he had built walls, tall, polished, professional walls, around his grief, around his guilt, around his own child. And now, a woman he barely acknowledged had walked straight through them, not with permission, but with compassion. He looked at Katharina. For the first time, really looked. And in her face, he saw no fear, just a quiet strength. And in that moment, Daniel didn't feel powerful. He felt small. Daniel didn't say much after that day, but he watched, from doorways, from the corner of the stairs, from the shadows of his own home. He watched Katharina. She wasn't doing anything grand. She wasn't performing. She was just present. On the living room rug, she built towers of wooden blocks with Jacob. When one fell, she laughed. So did he. She made animal sounds for his stuffed toys, sang lullabies with off-key hums, danced around the kitchen holding a spoon like a microphone. Daniel stood in the hallway and listened, and for the first time in a long time, the house wasn't quiet. It was alive, a home, not a showroom, a family, not just a father and his guilt. And yet, Daniel wasn't in those moments. He was an outsider, watching someone else give his son the very thing he hadn't dared to try, love without fear. He didn't interrupt, he didn't speak, he just watched and realized what it meant to be absent in your own child's life. Why does my son only smile when she's around? The question slipped out before Daniel could stop it. He was standing by the kitchen doorway again, just like the day before. And the day before that, watching. Jacob was laughing full-bodied and free, holding a wooden spoon like a sword as Katharina battled him with a spatula. Pure joy. The kind of joy Daniel had never seen on his son's face when he was in the room. The truth hit hard. Guilt. It crawled up his spine like a slow burn. He had been there physically, but emotionally absent. And now, this woman, the housemaid, the one he'd barely spoken to, she was the one Jacob laughed with, the one he reached for. Daniel leaned against the wall, rubbing the back of his neck. Shame mixed with curiosity. Who is she really? Not just her name, not just her job, but her heart, the one his child had already trusted before he ever did. That evening, the house was unusually quiet. Jacob had fallen asleep early. A full day of laughter tends to exhaust even the strongest little heart. Katharina stood in the kitchen, rinsing a cup when Daniel walked in, not in a rush, not with an agenda. Just holding 2 mugs. "Do you drink tea?" he asked. She paused, then nodded slowly. He poured her a cup, passed it across the counter. Their fingers brushed only for a second. Neither said anything, but neither pulled away too quickly. They sat down in near silence, separated by a wooden table, 2 mugs of tea, and 1,000 unspoken thoughts. "Jacob laughed a lot today," Daniel said. "He's been laughing more lately," Katharina replied. A pause. Their eyes met and held. Just a second longer than necessary. Not romantic, not awkward, just real and warm. No one said what was forming between them, but something was, and both of them felt it. It happened on a quiet Thursday morning. No lightning, no dramatic music, just sunlight through the curtains and the sound of tiny feet. Katharina was helping Jacob put on his tiny blue sweater, one arm through, then the next. He giggled as the collar slipped over his head. Then suddenly, he reached up, cupped her face in his small, chubby hands, and said it, "Mommy." The world stopped. Her hands froze mid-motion, her eyes widened, her heart cracked open. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. And in the doorway, unseen till now, stood Daniel. He had heard it, every syllable, but he didn't interrupt. His eyes were full of something deeper than surprise. He didn't say a word, because that one word, "Mommy," had already said everything. Daniel didn't barge in. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there motionless at the doorway. The man who once ruled this house with control and logic was now frozen by one word, "Mommy." His throat tightened. His eyes, normally guarded, calculating, began to shine with something unexpected. Not anger, but something softer, something wet. He watched Katharina hold his son, not like a nanny, not like a housemaid, but like a mother who would protect that child from the whole world. Jacob clung to her like she was all he ever needed. Daniel didn't speak, because for the first time in a long time, words were too small, and silence said it all. It hit Daniel like a wave, not loud, but overwhelming. All this time, he had hired nannies, experts, professionals, and yet none of them stayed. But she did. The one person who wasn't supposed to matter. The one who had no qualifications, no official duty to care. Katharina. She stayed. When his son cried, she ran. When others walked away, she leaned in. And now, without asking, without demanding, she had become the only safe place his son trusted. Daniel looked again, not as an employer, but as a man realizing a painful, liberating truth. She's not just the housemaid. She's the only one who never walked away. The rain fell soft and steady. The house was quiet, except for the rhythmic tapping against the windows. Daniel walked into the kitchen holding 2 mugs of warm tea, one for her, one for him. Katharina dried her hands and accepted the cup. No words yet, just steam and silence. Then he placed something on the table, a small worn bracelet, handmade, the kind of thing you don't buy, but keep. "My wife made this before Jacob was born," he said quietly. "She said she'd give it to him when he took his first steps." He paused. "She never got the chance." Katharina looked at the bracelet, her eyes softening. Then Daniel looked up, his voice low but steady. "I've been waiting to give this to someone who truly loves him, someone who never walks away, someone like you." He didn't kneel. There was no velvet box, no rehearsed speech. The rain still whispered on the windows. The bracelet lay between them, a silent vow. Daniel looked at Katharina, his voice low, but filled with everything unspoken. "Be Jacob's mother. Be our family." No big moment, no applause, just stillness and a heartbeat louder than words. Katharina's fingers trembled, her eyes shone, but she didn't cry. She looked at Daniel, this man who once seemed carved from stone, and she whispered the only answer he needed. Yes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Just a small nod. Quiet, but final. Daniel stood still, as if the world had paused to breathe. Katharina reached out, not for the bracelet, for him. Her arms wrapped around Daniel's chest, and he held her like a man holding something fragile and long lost. Between them, the old bracelet dangled from her wrist. Old thread, new heart. Outside, the rain continued falling, but inside, something had changed forever. There were no chandeliers, no tuxedos, no silk gowns, just white flowers. Just the wind, the trees, and 3 hearts that finally found each other. The ceremony took place beneath a blooming arch Daniel had built himself quietly without telling anyone. Katharina wore a simple cream dress, hair loosely pinned, smile trembling with joy. Jacob, in tiny suspenders, scattered flower petals with glee, more on himself than on the path. No vows were recited aloud, just eyes locked, just a touch of hands, and in that silence, every promise was heard. They didn't need a crowd, because love had already filled every corner of that garden. The hallway that once echoed silence now echoed something else. "Mommy! Daddy!" Jacob's voice rang out like music down the stairs, his tiny feet thumping across the wooden floor. He ran from room to room, his worn-out teddy bear in one hand, a trail of giggles in his wake, and behind him, warmth. Katharina moved slower now, not because she was tired, but because she was carrying something precious. A new life. Her hand often rested on her growing belly, and Jacob would place his ear against it, whispering secrets no one could hear. Daniel, once buried in blueprints and deadlines, now spent more time watching the life he almost missed. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon cookies, the living room overflowed with scattered toys and Sunday books, and that once lonely house finally felt like home. Not every home is built with wealth. Some are built with heartbreak and the courage to care anyway. This house wasn't saved by walls or windows, but by one woman's choice to love without permission. Katharina didn't have a title. She didn't wear a cape, but she showed up when no one else did. She stepped across a line not to break rules, but to mend a heart. And in doing so, she didn't just become a mother. She rebuilt a family. The final light of day poured through the kitchen window, casting golden stripes across the floor where Jacob sat giggling. Daniel looked up from his desk, his hand resting gently over Katharina's, the same hand that once held nothing but loss, now holding love. And in that still sacred silence, the house exhaled peace. Sometimes the people meant to be invisible are the ones who change everything. Real love doesn't need a title. Katharina's story teaches us something simple but powerful. You don't need a fancy title to matter. You don't need to share blood to love like a mother. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness, like bathing a crying child, can rewrite the story of someone's life. Be the one who crosses the invisible lines. Choose love, even when no one's watching. Because this world has no shortage of talent, but it desperately needs more people with kind, brave hearts. If this story moved you, if your heart paused for just a second, that's because truth always speaks quietly but powerfully. Subscribe to Through Her Eyes, where we don't just tell stories, we live them, we feel them, and sometimes they change the way we see the world.